Hi, guys. Thanks for joining me for just a few minutes as we talk about, again, how we're going to use AI in the classroom. How are we going to integrate these things and bring them together? Have had some great conversations in the past with a few people, and I just came out of a really cool summit. And so I learned some things, want to share some things on how we're implementing and doing some other things. For as long as we've had schools, the goal has seemed to be knowing, being able to know things. In fact, think about it. For teachers, we have rewarded the fastest hand in the air, the highest test score, the most robust answer, the memory that is locked in and locked down. Those are the ones that we have rewarded. But I'm going to tell you something right now that might make you feel uncomfortable. It does me a little bit, but I'm almost there. In the age of AI, knowing is no longer the competitive advantage. We are entering a world where the answer, it's a commodity. If you want to know a fact, you want to know a line of code, you want to know a historical analysis, you want to do some kind of machining and see how those things can go to the machine, ask the answer machine, about 3 seconds or so, you'll have the answer. So the next generation of winners out there, they will not be defined by the volume of information that they have stored in their heads. They're going to be defined by the clarity of the inquiries that they launch. So think about that. For decades now, we've measured giftedness by the speed of retrieval or creativity. If you could remember a date, you could solve an equation, you could solve a problem, you could cite a source faster than your peers, you won. You get the gold star. But we're standing at a massive historical pivot. We have today machines that have read every single book, they've indexed every line of code. We're in a world where the machine knows everything. So knowing is no longer a superpower, it's the baseline. For the gifted learners that are listening to this, or those that are teaching gifted learners, think about this. Your talent has always been your ability to find the answer quickly and generate a product. But today, the ceiling for that skill is starting to drop. Your new challenge isn't going to be finding and being the human search engine out there, but you've got to be the architect of inquiry. And that's really what I'm calling this, the architect of inquiry. You see, the next generation of winners won't be defined by what they know. They're going to be defined by what they think to ask. And how they approach those questions is going to be essential. Someone recently made a connection that I'm pretty humbled by. They connected me with Elon Musk. Now, I don't know how that happened because he's like light years ahead of me, but in this one area of understanding, I think there may be a connection. I've noted and have been on record as saying that education in its purest form is learning to ask a better question. Now, I realize that as I moved through the higher levels of academia, went from high school, college, then my master's programs, my specialists, and I went on to work in my doctoral programs. I've discovered really the breakthrough for me was found in refining my questions, and it unlocked my potential. The more that I refine my question, the more that I rephrase my question, and the power to ask a better question was really the evidence of knowledge, is the evidence of learning in my education. Elon Musk takes it a step further. He uses a principle called the first principles thinking, which is the act of literally boiling a matter down to its fundamental truths and asking questions from there rather than reasoning by analogy. Now, Musk recently in an interview said this. He said, the biggest thing is, what questions do we not know to ask? And once you know the question, the answer is usually the easy part. He says, those who know the questions, those who know what to ask, will be those that are successful in the next generation, in the new careers, in the new opportunities, in the new economy. That's going to be there. So I want you to think about this. The technologies that are unfolding right now, we are handing all of our learners a machine that essentially knows everything. So it's read all the books, it's scanned all the research papers, it's indexed every single line of code. But here's the catch. The machine is a library without a librarian. So if you ask a mediocre question, you get a mediocre result. If you ask, I'm going to use the voice of my students. If you ask a dumb question, you're going to get a dumb result. So you have to master the art of asking exact right questions to the machine in order to build anything. And you can. So if the framework for the problem is surgically precise, then the how of the matter gets executed very accurately. So for the educators that are listening to this, that are on board, and you're scratching your head and you're wondering, do we carry this to the next level? What do we do? How do I use this in the classroom? What does this mean for me? I mean, I was privy to a conversation one time that recently of some central office personnel, some heads of personnel who were concerned that if we go forward with AI, the computer is going to replace a teacher. That's not going to happen. We need teachers. We need educators, because our role shifts from being the source of the answer to being the coaches of creativity and curiosity. I want you to let that sink in. You become the coach of curiosity. You become the facilitator over how to think, solve problems, ask deeper questions, refine questions, and get to that point of interrogating the machine in order to discover where you need to be. So for the students that are listening, the skill is no longer knowing, the skill becomes knowing how to ask the right question. And that's why you need your educator, because of their skill, their wisdom, and their insight. So you had to learn to frame the problem before you can find the answer and you get its solution. So you can't ignore the problem, and you can't ignore the questions, or you're going to ignore your future. Now, this isn't just philosophy. A lot of folks are saying this is a philosophy of education and we've got to explore the philosophy. I don't think so. I think it's new technical literacy. How we're going to use these devices, how we're going to interact with these devices, and how we're going to unlock the genius that is inside of all of us, because I believe that we are created with a genius. And I'm letting you in on a little bit of my worldview. So I'm looking at that. I call this prompt engineering. Okay? Prompt engineering. How are we going to engineer our prompts? If we engineer our prompts correctly, if we master that art, then we're going to get to precision thinking. But if you're fuzzy in your questions, you're going to get, somebody said, a hallucinated answer. That's a good word for it. Now, there's basically two levels to this inquiry. So at the basic level, level number one, basically asking the question, just simply asking the question. 7th grade students, I spent a lot of time with them, even gifted students. They will ask a very simple question and they get a simple answer and they get frustrated because they wanted to know more. Good, I'm glad you're frustrated. Let's ask more. So the basic question would be, write a Python script for a website. Boom. Well, it's going to be generic. The answer, it may not work. It may not function fully where you want it to be. So that's a basic question. Then you're going to ask, or need to ask, really level 2 questions. That's where we need to take people. Teachers, think about this. We've got to take students to the level 2. That's the engineered ask. So you've got to assign a persona. You've got to take on a different tone. Ask a senior full stack developer to write a Python script using Flask framework that integrates a Stripe API for subscriptions, ensuring that PEP 8 compliance, including error handling for failed transactions. You're going to get, when you ask that question, a professionally grade tool that's ready for deployment. Now, there's a lot of steps to that. When you go in, you think about how complex the question was, and all of a sudden the result was a little bit more accurate to what you were looking for in your research and in your output. So the difference is this: the machine is intelligent, but the clarity comes in the human intent. What is intended by what we are asking? See, that's where the ethics lies. The machine's not ethical. It knows nothing about ethics. The machine knows nothing about editing. But the humanity knows the ethics of it, the right things to ask. That's what I want to define with ethics, the right things to ask. Then the right way to use it. How are you using the information that has come? Then how are you verifying that the information is correct? Those are the things that we need to look at. So when I look at the machine, it can't do some things. In fact, what it can't do is huge. It cannot decide what's worth doing. That's my role. When you're a high achiever, when you're taking your skill set to the next level, when you're working through all of these things, it isn't just knowing how to ask, it's knowing what's worth asking. What is it that is worth my time, the machine's time, to answer the question, or am I going to be frustrated? And it helps me refine my question over and over again. And here's what's really interesting is the AI program is learning from us every single time we ask a question. And it's digging in and it is exposed to our level, and it can guide us through that process of learning more. So for the educators in the room that are listening to this, guys, we're in a new frontier. I mean, we're boldly going where no man has gone before. Hope you get that humor in that. But we're not teaching students anymore to just find the answer. That's cheap. We're teaching students to find their purpose, to discover how they can unlock their purpose and how they can achieve great things in their life. That's our role. That's what we're trying to do. Thomas J. Watson was the founder of IBM. He said the ability to ask the right question is more than half the battle in finding the right answer. But in our day and time, it's 90% of the battle, not 50%. So we've got to learn to ask that right question. Now, for our students that are listening, if you're out there, listen, you got an incredible tool at your fingertips. Teachers that are playing around with AI, you got an incredible tool at your fingertips. But that tool is only as sharp as the mind that is wielding it. Don't be passive when it comes to asking the question. Be an architect of inquiry. Really start digging in there. Stop trying to be the person with the right answer the fastest in the room, and start being the person that asks a better question. Think through your questions. Dig in. Be the person who asks what everyone else has missed, and you'll be the one that is building the future. Now, there's some concepts that we want to consider as we continue to dig in. One of those is go back and think about what Musk talked about with the first principle thinking. This is the idea of breaking everything down to their fundamental truths. So you start there. You got to use your mind to do that. Then you have to learn the persona principle. I love using this. That's in prompt engineering. You tell the AI who it ought to be. A lot of times I'll go in and say, you are a middle school social studies teacher, which is what I teach. And I want you to ask this question or develop this concept or compare and contrast this, and I'll detail it out in its order of those things. You are a student that is developing a presentation based on the historical background of the Bantu tribe and their migration around Africa. What was the first steps? What were the tools needed? You got that. And so you can dig in, or you can even ask it, you remember the Bantu tribe and you're reflecting on your history and what you have experienced. That assists the machine in understanding the place that it needs to begin, and you get closer to your better answer. The Watson quote about asking a better question is 50% of the battle. I want you to think about that. Today, I really do think it's 90%, and that's where we're at today. But there is an intentionality gap that is here. Now, it emphasizes this. AI can provide you the how. It can give you the how you do this, how you do that. But as a human, you've got to give it the why. You've got to be the purpose behind the question that is there. Our world is full of answers. They're everywhere. And answers, they're cheap. And today, They are instant and instantaneous. So I want to leave you with this thought. I mean, just this one thing. What do I need to ask? What do I need to ask? You've got it in you. Ask the right questions. Thanks for being with me. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate a follow. Appreciate a share. Hope you have a great day.